I remember starting to meditate around that age. Um, and I had some experiences of just dissolving into, I didn't know what it was, but I remember having experience of just dissolving into nothingness and just endless space and wondering, what the hell's that? I remember just feeling an absence of my neurosis, my insecurities, and I kind of wanted more of it. I got curious about it at that point. It was a really life-changing experience, really was. And I walked into that group with a bit of a defense of, I don't have too many issues to work on. I'll be fine. Within a couple of hours, that got pricked really quickly. Like they just saw through the pretense. It just started to feel like, okay, this is safe. This is okay. I can be a mess here. And I started to get more in touch with the underlying trauma and the grief that I had. That was a mind-blowing experience. I remember on about day 7, I felt like my mind started to dissolve, like I couldn't hold on to anything. Within 10 seconds, I could feel my neurosis coming back. I was profoundly disappointed. Like, I came here to reach this concept of enlightenment, and look at me, I'm just back in my neurosis. But I was really interested in Vipassana now. By the time I did the 3rd retreat, I had this inkling that it was making me escape myself. I was starting to feel like I was spiritually bypassing. Like, that if all you do is just waking up, you become imbalanced and unintegrated.
Hi, everyone. Today, my guest is Noel Haarburger. I've been really looking forward to my conversation with him. He's a psychologist and psychotherapist. Noel has special interest in trauma and somatic approaches to therapy, as well as integrating developmental attachment perspectives, Buddhist psychology, and non-dual spiritual approaches into his work. He's certified somatic experiencing practitioner, which utilizes highly effective and safe body awareness methods for negotiating and releasing trauma developed by Peter Levine. Noel is also an ongoing student of the Diamond Heart approach, a Western psychospiritual school that integrates mindfulness, Western depth psychology, Sufism, and Buddhist approaches to personal and spiritual development. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. And if you do, please make sure to like it and to subscribe. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, Maggie. Hi.
Hi.
I like this kind of welcome. That's pretty nice.
Yeah. I'm also stretching because like I'm so not used to doing these recordings. I know it's like 10:30 is not actually like early morning anymore, but sometimes it takes a while for my brain cells to kick in.
And I do want to just say I loved your book so much.
Thank you.
I want to say that to you. It was a beautiful book because it was so real and it was so heartfelt and so willing to engage the mess of the spiritual journey in a way that not many people do. So
Yeah.
I found it inspiring. I haven't finished it yet. I'm still reading it, but it was a great book.
So let's start from something that I got really curious about when you talk about growing in a spiritual cult. What sort of place was that like and how that impacted you?
Yeah. Well, the cult was called The Family,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is a very kind of, it's almost my experience of this cult was the opposite of feeling like I was in a family, but that's what they called it. The guru, her name was Anne Hamilton Byrne. I don't know whether you've heard of her or not, but she actually even had branches across America and even in England. In Kent,
Wow.
there was a cult following in England, actually, down in Kent. But her main focus was in the Dandenong Ranges, and that's where I grew up. Um, and when I was born into the cult, so my mum was a cult member, and so was my dad. My mum got into it first, and then I think she pulled my dad into it. And back then, this is the late 60s, everyone was really interested in, well, not everyone, that's not true, but a lot of people were really enamored with the spirituality from the East coming over to the West, and, gurus coming over to the West and talking about Eastern spirituality. And I think people idealized spirituality back then. And Anne Hamilton Byrne became a guru. I think she was a yoga teacher and a psychiatric nurse before she became a self-appointed guru.
Okay. One of those.
Um, one of those self-appointed ones. Um, but it was, like it was a very dysfunctional cult. There was a lot of physical and emotional abuse towards the kids. A lot of the children in the cult were kind of handballed around to different cult members. And so there was a lot of disrupted attachment in many of the children in the cult where like they were handballed around to different cult members. So for me, when I was 2 years old, I was given to another cult member who looked after me for 2 years while my mum went off and did residential nursing training. So I saw my mum maybe once every 3 weeks for an
Hmm.
afternoon. So I didn't never see her for that period of time. But essentially, I was fostered to this other cult member who looked after three other children. So she had four children. She was a cult member who'd never been a mother, and she was a single woman, and she was looking after four of us for 2 years. And she had no idea about mothering. Um, and so I lived with her for a couple of years, and then the guru sent my mum overseas for a year when I was 5, thinking that the guru was worried that if children got too close to their parents, that was problematic. Um, so she was kind of systematically wanted children to grow up very quickly. Like I think she idealized independence rather than attachment. So when I was 5, she sent my mum overseas for a year to do a nursing job in Italy. Um, and apparently she said to my mum, don't let your son get too close to you because he'll become gay. That was one of the messages she said to my mum. Isn't that crazy? It's like,
It's the whole thing so far with
oh,
just separating you from your mom at such an important age as well. My God.
that's right. I mean, it had a bigger trauma on me. Like a lot of my trauma was attachment disruption trauma, as well as there was a lot of corporal punishment in the cult. Like any cult member could strap a kid with a belt or a cane if they wanted to. There was a lot of kind of physical abuse. And so I grew up feeling very scared of adults and not trusting them, and um, becoming very self-reliant, really, like not wanting to reach out for support, not trusting support. Yeah.
So, which bit about this place was actually spiritual? Because nothing that you've mentioned, where's the spiritual bits about this spiritual cult?
Good question. Well, their spirituality was a crazy synthesis of kind of some Eastern spirituality, like kind of Hinduism, as well as Christianity. So, but it was a path. What Anne Hamilton Burns said to all her cult members was, "This is your last reincarnation, or this is
Hmm.
your last incarnation. If you join this cult, you'll become self-realized, and you won't have to come back when you die. Like you'll reincarnate into a spiritual soul or whatever." They met every week in a church that was kind of like a church, and they meditated and they listened to Anne Hamilton Byrne give a talk. Most of it was around self-realization stuff. They taught them meditation and yoga. I learned yoga when I was 10 years old because that's what brought into our house. So I was taught how to do yoga at a very young age, and a little bit about meditation. But there was such profound incongruency between the teachings, which was about love and self-realization, and the way they showed up with the children and with each other. And it was all about, really, it was spiritually bypassing. I don't think there was any personal growth that I could see in any of the cult members. They were all, my experience of a lot of the cult members were that they were abusive and nasty and scary. And I
Yeah.
don't remember any cult members that I ever met that I trusted and felt safe with. Um, Maybe a few, but not often. So it was yeah, there was a big incongruency between the espoused teachings and their actual practices, which were pretty harsh towards kids. And there's a whole other side story where Anne Hamilton Byrne adopted children from women that had mental health issues in psychiatric hospitals. She took their kids and convinced them that they were too mentally sick to look after the kids. So she took the kids as babies. One of my adopted brother, who my mother adopted, was one of those kids. But Anne Hamilton Byrne, she took a lot of these kids and dyed their hair blonde and brought them up in a compound in a place called Eildon, which was about an hour and a half, 2 hours out of Melbourne. And she cut them off from the world and brought them up until they were about 17, 18. A lot of these kids were just brought up in this house and treated horribly, had their hair dyed blonde. They all had the same haircut and the same color hair. There's a bunch of documentaries on this. If you plug in the family into YouTube, you'll probably come up with a documentary about it because it was pretty horrendous. And in 1987, the police broke into this compound and took all the kids and saved them essentially and sent them off into foster homes and but yeah, and she lied to all the kids and said that they are her children. So all these children thought that she was her mother, and she was hardly ever there, but she was their mother. And then she also gave a lot of the children in the cult LSD at a very young age, and she called them clearings. And the clearings were meant to help the child, I don't know, through the LSD, realize their true nature and to self-reflect. And so a lot of the cult members were given LSD. The adult cult members as well as the late teen cult members were given LSD. So when I was 17, I was given an LSD trip as a kind of introduction into the cult.
Unbelievable. And what was that like?
To be honest, I actually really enjoyed the trip.
Yeah. Okay.
It was great. It wasn't traumatic. It was fascinating. And I had a couple of cult members come up and try to do a past life regression on me and hypnosis. And essentially they were trying to get me to do some self-inquiry about what I wanted out of my life and where I wanted to go with my life. That part was, I wouldn't recommend that, but it did kind of help me learn how to do some self-reflection. And it opened my mind quite a lot. But I wasn't mature enough to really make a lot out of it at that age.
Yeah.
But it was a very interesting experience.
So I don't know if this question may sound a bit weird, given that we're talking about cult, where, the cult has its own normal, what's normal for the
Yeah,
cult. So
right,
like,
exactly.
right?
Yeah,
So when you grew up in the cult, especially, then you don't know any different, right? So that's
yeah.
like your normal. So I wonder, first of all, were there any kind of moments where the adults that were part of this cult actually were going, hold on a sec, like
Hang
you're
on.
teaching this, but you're doing that. And so that incongruency that you talked about. So that would be my first question. And the second question is, have you had those inklings yourself where you started questioning what the hell is going on and maybe tuning into some intuition in yourself that was telling you this is not right, what's going on here. There's this incongruency. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I just to be clear with the second question you just asked, um, the cult got kind of busted up in 1987 and I was about 17.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd never been invited to the church and kind of brainwashed into the cult teachings because they generally believed that you needed to be an adult to come to the meetings. So
Mm-hmm.
in a sense, I wasn't really like an active cult member. I was just a child of the cult members.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the enormous physical abuse as well as the um, interrupted attachment, I never liked Anne Hamilton Byrne. She was physically abusive to me as a child. I never liked the cult. I never trusted it. And as I matured, probably around 16, 17, I just started to have more understanding of what it was about. And I had no interest to be part of it. And I was really disappointed that my parents were in it. And it
Mm-hmm.
made me lose respect for them because I just I could see the corruption in it. I could see the abuse in it, the lack of health about it. So my experience was I never really became a cult member, and I
Mm-hmm.
always felt separate from it. But I was affected by it in many ways. Um, but for the others, over the years, I saw many people leave the cult. Some stayed, but the cult got smaller and smaller. And then after they did the Eildon raid, where the children got taken out of that compound and rescued and protected, it got a lot of negative social media, and more people left the cult until
Mm-hmm.
it just shriveled up. And Hamilton Byrne developed dementia as she got older and ended up in a nursing home. And the cult just kind of busted up naturally. But a lot of people left it before that happened. But unfortunately, my dad and my mum were in it for a very long time. And my dad eventually left when I was about 30. And I was so proud of him and I was so happy about it. And I asked him, why did you leave the cult, Dad? I mean, you were so ensconced in it. And he said, I left it because Anne Hamilton Byrne started talking about little people living in the center of the earth. There was this
Right. Yeah.
little civilization of little people living in the center of the earth, and that was her latest theory. I mean, she was out there with her theories. She was like um, pretty, in my view, she was a bit crazy, really. She was a bit of a nutter.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people believed everything she said. Um, but that was the straw that broke my dad's back. Like when he heard her say that, he said, "No, I can't
Yeah.
buy that." And he was burdened by all the pressures that she put him under. She was very, very controlling. You know, she gave people their names. She told people who to be in relationship with. She even told people what careers to have. Like she had her fingers in everyone's life in a huge way. And I think my dad felt oppressed, very oppressed by it, and but guilty about leaving. And as you can imagine, a lot of people find community in cults. They build relationships and connections, and hence to leave is very difficult because they have to let go of all the connection and the belonging that they might have developed.
Of
And
course.
I think it's what makes it hard for people to leave cults.
There was a period when I was studying different cults, and I listened to a lot of people who left specifically places like Scientology. And it was the same, the same mechanism, so much control, so much separation from families as well. Like,
Mm,
and that was actually one of the dilemmas, that sometimes even if the family members sort of woke up and wanted out, they would stay because of other family members. And if they
mm.
left, they just suffered such guilt and such fear, because once they left, the members who stayed, the family members that stayed, they were not allowed actually
Have contact.
to have contact,
Yeah.
So But from what you're saying, it seems like that separation was already happening within the cult, them sheep separating children from their parents, so that separation was already going on anyway. So talk to me about one of the things that I really enjoyed hearing you talk about was the sort of burning curiosity to know what's actually true. And so I wonder, when did that start? Was there a particular moment where you felt that curiosity sort of come up to the surface? And when did you start opening up to exploring spirituality specifically?
Yeah. I don't think I've ever been asked that question, so it's an interesting one to ponder. Um, because I grew up with such a deep, low self-esteem and a lot of insecurity, a lot of social anxiety, um, and shame. I didn't feel like I didn't feel like I fitted in with my peers from adolescence onwards. I felt there was a sense of feeling separate, like a bit of a square peg in a round hole. I didn't have the confidence that my peers had. Um, I didn't really identify with the concept of, dominant masculinity, be tough, be strong, be a womanizer, drink. All that stuff just didn't kind of do it for me. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that I think that sense of feeling different and suffering partly made me start searching for, what not necessarily consciously initially, but it was an unconscious search for um, kind of where can I find myself? Who am I? Like wanting to find a sense of self. And so I was kind of I became interested in spirituality at a pretty young age. And in a way, the first way I got into it was through Christianity because I went to a boarding school from when I was 14 onwards. And you had to go to church as part of the boarding school, which on one level I hated because I wasn't really interested in the rituals. And I didn't really like the priests. But some part of me started talking to God. I started reaching out to God. I started praying and tuning into feeling like there's something bigger than me out there that I want to connect with. And that was my kind of, I guess the growing up in the cult also made me aware that there is such thing as spirituality. I knew about that from when I was pretty young.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so there was an interest in what is spirituality? What is spirit? What is the sacred? And I think that the mixture of the Christianity at school, the cult, kind of just made me curious about that. And then that curiosity, probably towards 18, I started to get even more curious. And I remember starting to meditate around that age. Um, and I had some experiences of just dissolving into, I didn't know what it was, but I remember having experience of just dissolving into nothingness and just endless space and wondering, what the hell's that? I didn't have language for it or any words for it.
How did that come about?
I was I was 18 and I just remember meditating. I don't remember how I got into meditation, but I think it just spontaneously happened. I just closed my eyes and tuned in. And I just remember it took me somewhere. I don't remember exactly the details of what happened, but I remember at some point experiencing this profound, expansive, empty space that felt incredibly peaceful and expansive and open. And I remember just feeling an absence of my neurosis, my insecurities, and I kind of wanted more of it. I got curious about it at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because I didn't realize, I mean, just listening to you talking about the sort of entry point being via Christianity, and actually that was the case for me as well.
Really?
Yeah, because I was born into Catholic religion. So we were used to going to church every Sunday, but it was
Right.
like church goers. But there wasn't, like, it's not like, there was a religion and then there was faith, and I could from a very early age, I could see how there's a distinction between the two, and that you didn't need religion to have faith. And in fact, having religion was problematic. You know, like I can tell you, I remember like standing in a church at the age of maybe like 12, and I knew that I was listening to dogma, that I wasn't
Oh,
really
wow.
listening.
That's
Yeah,
amazing that at 12 you got that impression. Yeah.
yeah. I got that very early on, and I wouldn't even know the word dogma at the time, but I just knew that there was, and don't even ask me why, because I have no idea. I just knew that all main religions pointed to a fundamental truth that was universal,
Mm.
and
It's
that the
like an
religion,
intuition.
yeah, and that the religion, so even though I didn't know what that truth was, I knew that truth was there, and it was like a truth with capital T, and that it was
Mm.
universal. Whereas I saw religions as divisive, actually
Yeah.
taking people out of that sense of
Yeah.
that truth that connects. And so I knew this was not my place. So I read the Bible. By the age I was 15, by the time I was 15, I read the Bible. I was
Wow.
asking questions. I was like nagging priests and telling me, this doesn't make sense. You're telling me this, but the Bible says this. So like, so they probably had
Sounds
enough
like
of
you
me.
had your own version of a kind of burning curiosity for the truth as well.
Yeah, totally. And but it's like you said, it's like when you said that you weren't even kind of aware of that at the time, I wouldn't be aware. I was just like very curious because what I was hearing just didn't make sense to me. What
Yeah,
I was
none of it
hearing in the
made sense to me
church,
either. Yeah. Mm.
right? So I was looking for a group. I was looking for a place that would make sense to me out
Right.
of what I was, trying to
Mhm.
understand. And there was a little kind of off group in the church that they like, for example, they wouldn't do any rituals. They would just pray openly or even out loud. And also they would be very much into music. Like when you entered that place, it was like buzzing with like really great music. And whereas in the church, it felt like you were sitting on during funeral, it was just the music was like,
Sober and heavy and serious
uh,
and
yeah.
oh
So for a
gosh, yeah.
young person,
Yeah.
young teenager was like, God, take me
Yeah.
out of
Yeah. Yeah.
here. So when I found these people, it was like, and because I love to sing as well, so I found a way to express myself through singing as well. And I remember my first loud prayer, during that group, and I felt this like unconditional love at the time, So I think I had profound faith in God, but not God that was like institutionalized and
Yeah.
described
Totally. Yeah.
as this is what God is. To me, it was like a
Mm.
mystery. It was like a sense of the God was there, but it was like a mystery. It wasn't like a person sitting on a throne in
Up in the
heavens,
clouds. Yeah.
up in the clouds. So thank you for bringing this up because that actually, I kind of remember that, but I feel like I kind of glossed over that bit. I don't even think I mentioned it in the book, to be honest. I didn't
I don't
realize that
think.
that
Yeah.
was kind of an entry.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? No, we have that similar interest or similar experience of an end. Well, obviously, our stories are so unique, but yes, there was an element of Christianity being a support for entry into spirituality
Mm-hmm.
and the sacred in a way. Like it kind of, it opened me to an awareness of the sacred, even though I hated everything under the roof of the church. And like you were saying, I could sense the falseness of it and the dogma of it. And
Yeah.
not as early as you though. I think it took. I mean, it took me probably in my late teens, early 20s before I started, having those kind of insights that you shared. Mm.
Yeah, and there was a book that was given to me by this guy who we used to call philosopher. He was actually going to study psychology at university, and he knew what I was going through, that I was questioning religion and questioning faith. And he gave me this book by a guy called Anthony DeMello, who
Oh, I know. I've got a book of his.
you
Yeah.
know, you know, Awakening, right?
A
And
great book. One of my first books I read. It's an amazing book. Yeah.
that's incredible, though. So that was one of my first books on like this theme of awakening and spirituality, but I actually don't remember that book at all as a book about awakening. I
Yeah.
remember that book. I remember how I felt when I read this book because I felt like a black sheep because I questioned school, I questioned teachers, I questioned church. I was really, I didn't accept just because authority says something that I have to follow it. And I felt like a sheep, black sheep, and I felt like I was kind of on the outskirts. And when I read this book, because he was questioning the religious institutions and talking about like the conditioning and the dogma and all of that, and he talked about questioning being good,
Mm.
it's a good
Mm.
thing. I remember just feeling less of a black sheep. That's what I remember the most, that it was actually while I was being seen as like the difficult child or the troublemaker, and therefore I felt like a black sheep. I was actually just a curious person. I was a
You
curious
were.
kid. I was just not
Yeah.
accepting what I was hearing as a given.
Yeah. That's
Um,
awesome. Mm.
so I remember that book as not so much about spirituality awakening, but it made me feel like it's okay. It's okay to question, and you're not a black sheep for doing that, and so on. So that's amazing
Wonderful.
that this was one of your earliest books, and this was one of my earliest books as well. So that's incredible. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, there's an interesting coincidence. Yeah. No, I just
yeah.
realized I think the first book I ever read that blew my mind apart was Carl Jung, actually, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. And
Wow.
I might have read that when I was, I don't know, 18 or 19.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember when I read Anthony DeMello's book. Maybe that might have been in my mid-20s or something, but
Mm-hmm.
I certainly had that strong seeking drive that you also had to understand reality, to understand the truth, to know what's it all about? Why are we here? Who am I? What is reality? Those questions were kind of always there for me,
Yeah.
initially unconsciously, and then when in my early 20s, it became a much stronger drive consciously that I really wanted to understand the human condition. I really wanted to understand the psyche.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and studied psychology when I was 18 and enrolled into a psychology course. And that was really boring, to be honest.
Was it?
Oh, it's all about rats and stats, what they called rats
Oh,
and stats, like it
yeah. Yeah.
was super boring. And I learned nothing about the human condition until I did my kind of postgraduate training as a counselor. But you kind of had to do this boring stuff in order to become a psychologist. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned to me that no, you didn't mention it to me. You mentioned it in one of the conversations that I watched, that at the age of 20, you were sitting listening to music in your room, and you had this like incredible experience and realizations around your insecurity. So I wonder how that fits with your studies, and also how did that experience, if you can talk about it, and also how did it inform the direction of you sort of moving toward exploring Buddhism at all?
yeah, yeah, great question. Let me think. Um, I can't remember how it all came together, to be honest. Like maybe it'll come to me as I talk, but I remember that moment and I was meditating, and you wouldn't believe who I was listening to. It's like the ultimate music that makes you cry. It was Enya. Do you remember Enya?
Oh, wow. Of course I do. Yes. I listened to her as a teenager as well.
Oh, she was so cool. I loved Enya.
So cool. Yeah. Yeah. Total ultimate tearjerker. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So I was listening to her. I was meditating, or just I was kind of like contemplating, not necessarily meditating, but just sitting there contemplating, and I just had the realization of how painful it was to not trust myself. Like it just
Hmm.
dawned on me, I don't trust myself. I don't have any value in myself, and I'm constantly seeking approval from others. I'm constantly insecure about being rejected and abandoned. Any kind of positive interaction I had, I would lose faith that that was real very quickly. So I couldn't trust the connections I had with people. It was kind of like
Hmm.
the bucket would get filled up, but then there was a hole in the bottom of the bucket, and all of a sudden I'd just start feeling insecure about every single connection I had. And it just opened up this well of grief. And I started to feel the suffering of just being constantly full of shame and insecurity and worry and anxiety, and this grief just opened up, and I had this huge sob, and that was the first time I remember ever crying for years and years and years. Like I think I shut down my heart as a kid in order to cope with the trauma of what I went through. So I was pretty detached most of my teens, pretty disconnected. But
Hmm.
this just, my heart just cracked open, and I just felt this grief open up, and it flooded me. And in the middle of this grief, I had this experience of it felt like it was coming from outside of me, and it felt like sweet honey just descending down the top of my head into my body. And I had this feeling of sweetness. It was like love, like pure, sweet, honey-like love. And it just filled my whole body. And I just for the first time, I had this feeling of feeling like I matter. The first time I ever remember feeling that. I'm feeling goosebumps now as I share it.
Yeah.
It was a profound experience of, I was blown away by what this was, what this feeling was. And it it lasted for a good couple of months, this feeling of I'm okay. There's nothing wrong with me. It didn't stay forever. I mean, I think it had an impact on me, a lasting impact on me, but I think I needed to do a whole lot more therapy to really work through my history. But it
Hmm.
really opened me up, and it helped me trust that pain is a doorway into love, and that I don't need to push away my pain so much. I can be with it. I think after that experience, when I was 20, I was still studying psychology, and there was a course I wanted to do after my undergraduate degree, which was an honors and it was a half a master's and an honors degree. It was this hybrid course called the Bachelor of Educational Counselling. And to get into the course, I had to do some therapy and some personal development. That was a prerequisite. And so I thought, okay, what will I do? And so I at the time around that time, I was, believe it or not, I was doing voluntary phone counseling as part of my placement in doing this course that I wanted to do. Um, I met a Gestalt therapist in this telephone counseling course I did, and I really liked his vibe. I liked his energy. He was real. He was light. He was contactful. He was inspiring. And I talked to him, and he kind of said, "Why don't you try Gestalt therapy?" And I thought, okay, I'll give that a go. I knew that I needed to do a bit of work on myself, even though I was very defended and disconnected. I kind of, some part of me knew I needed to do some work on myself. Thank God I had a little bit of maturity to do that. So I enrolled in a 2-year, ended up being 2 years of group Gestalt therapy. That was my first introduction to therapy. And it was a really life-changing experience, really was. And I walked into that group with a bit of a defense of I don't have too many issues to work on. I'll be fine. Maybe I can help the other people in the group.
I'm
No, it's
familiar with this attitude. No.
oh really?
Oh, yeah.
I would call it a bit of a narcissistic defense. Like
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I wanted to be special, I wanted to be important, and I kind of developed this fantasy of myself as kind of as I started to study psychology, I had a lot of fantasies of being the best psychologist in the world, who
Of
knew the most,
course.
and I was going to write a book, and
Mm.
that kind of puffed up my self-esteem a bit because I didn't have much of a self-esteem, and for a while it puffed it up, and I went into this group with a bit of a puffed up self-esteem, um, and within a couple of hours that got pricked really quickly, like they just saw through the pretense.
I'm assuming that must have been a slightly painful experience or
What's that?
not. Was it a painful experience
Oh,
or
it
not?
was excruciating because
Mm-hmm.
they could see through the pretense and the persona, and they kept on picking up the vulnerability and the disconnection I had.
Ouch.
And they brought that to the surface, and I started to feel really raw and really vulnerable and really insecure. And it was hard. But what I learned in that group was everyone was sharing their vulnerability. Everyone was being raw. Everyone was being real. Everyone was crying and getting angry and processing their grief and their fear from their histories. And it just started to feel like, okay, this is safe. This is okay. I can be a mess here. And I started to um, get more in touch with the underlying trauma and the grief that I had, and do some work around that. Um, and that during that process, I started to become addicted to personal development. It's like I
Mm-hmm.
just, because I could feel myself growing up, I could feel myself knowing how to have better relationships. I started to realize what I really wanted in friendships. Before that, most of my friendships, I was just being a follower and trying to fit in and hanging out with people that weren't really healthy for me. And I started to meet some genuinely lovely, caring, curious, empathic people that I could be real with. And then some of those friends in that group I'm still friends with because I learned what real friendship was in that group. I learned what real authentic relating meant to me and what that
Yeah.
was. So really, as I reflect on it now, I feel incredibly grateful for that experience because it profoundly um, taught me how to show up and be a real person with people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it took a while, like it didn't happen overnight. It was a process, but and during that time I met a couple of people who were into Buddhism. Now it's coming back to me. Um, and I started to get reinterested in spirituality because Gestalt has roots in Zen Buddhism as well. And I kind
I had
of,
no idea.
yeah, it's got roots in Zen Buddhism, existentialism, phenomenology, psychodrama. It's an experiential therapy that focuses on here and now experience. It's very focused on emotion and embodied experience. It's a relational therapy, so it's interested in how we make contact with other people,
Mm-hmm.
how we show up, how we let people in. Um, it's very focused on kind of connecting to the authentic self and learning how to express that from ourselves, express that. But it's not intellectual. It's very embodied. It's like a classic Gestalt question, very similar to EPs. Like, what are you experiencing now as you talk about this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, what's happening? Let's just come into your immediate experience and be with it. So that's what I loved about it. It just kind of broke through all my intellectual defenses and got me into my feelings, which is what I needed because I was really living above the eyebrows before I did Gestalt therapy. I had to think through everything. I had to analyze everything and understand everything to feel secure in the world. And
Oh yeah.
I'm sure you have some resonance with that.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I actually, it was one of the most astounding realizations in the journey that I've been through, that how that analysis, I'm not saying that all analysis is bad or all,
No,
I think
yeah.
it
Yeah.
absolutely has its place in a particular context and everything. But I'm speaking specific about a moment when I realized that in my case, the intellectualizing and the sort of rationalizing and looking for answers in the mind and
Yeah.
analysis and even looking for a deeper meaning at some point,
That's right.
it
Yeah.
was
I did
all a
exactly the
coping
same.
mechanism. It was
Yeah.
all a coping mechanism. It was really just preventing me from actually feeling, and even finding a deeper meaning was almost like a sedative. Let me find that deeper meaning about what's going on so I can feel more safe. But of course, it
Yeah.
was all
Exactly.
completely innocent, and I had absolutely no idea that this was going on. But it was nevertheless, I lived, like you say, above the eyebrows for a very long time after my first awakening. But that's another story. So you're starting to meet these people who are into Buddhism, correct?
Yeah. In the Gestalt group, there was a couple of, oh, that's right. It's all coming back to me. There was a
Good.
guy who was a big Vipassana guy. He was into
Hmm.
meditation and Buddhism, and he was doing 10-day retreats and month retreats, and he was in my group, and I just got really interested and curious. Okay, what's all this Vipassana stuff about? I knew about meditation and spirituality from my upbringing, so I enrolled with one of the group members. His name was Richie. We got a bus from Melbourne up to Sydney, um, in the Blue Mountains where the retreat was held. And we went and showed up to this 10-day retreat,
Hmm.
um, about 10 hours of meditation a day, silence, no talking. It was pretty intense, pretty intense.
I bet.
Um, a lot of people bailed out from it around day 3 or day 4 because it was just like
I'm not
just
surprised.
sitting 10 hours a day. You started meditating at 4:30, finished around 8. It's like, whew. Anyway, there was something about the intensity of it that drew me to it, and um, that was a mind-blowing experience. I remember on about day 7, I felt like my mind started to dissolve. Like I couldn't hold on to anything. I couldn't, like it felt like my worldview that I'd nicely and neatly curated and put together just collapsed. Like I just, it was scary. And I remember feeling like I was dissolving and it was terrifying. Like I had this experience of terror come up,
Yeah.
like sheer terror of losing control. Because as you were saying before, like me, I relied on my mind as my main way of feeling secure and coping and to be able to analyze things and make sense of things, to compare myself to others and all that. So that major coping mechanism just started to fall apart. And I went through a couple of days of just feeling very anxious and panicky. And then it settled and I started to feel more comfortable with this kind of feeling of a void, um, and feeling peace and spaciousness towards the last day. But then as soon as it finished, I remember we were allowed to go and talk to people and introduce ourselves. Within 10 seconds, I could feel my neurosis coming back. I started to have those thoughts of, oh, did that person think I said the wrong thing? And I shouldn't have hugged that person. And maybe I sounded silly there. And what does that person think of me? That was my classic neurosis. It was so insecure and socially anxious. And it all came back and I was profoundly disappointed. Like I came here to reach this concept of enlightenment and look at me, I'm just back in my neurosis. And
Yeah.
it was quite a quite a disappointing
It's
experience,
super
actually.
disappointing. Yeah. Fall down from those heights,
Fall from
on your
grace.
human ass, and the
Yeah,
humanness,
definitely.
and be disappointed by the fact that the humanness is still there.
Yeah, I was back on my human ass. That's
Yeah.
true. I like that phrase.
Yeah.
But interestingly, what happened was I met some nice people who are shiatsu therapists in the retreat, and they invited me and Richie to come down to their Sydney shiatsu center and have a free shiatsu session. And it was in the middle of that session, and I was thinking, God damn it, I wish I wasn't so neurotic. I wish I could feel this freedom that I felt in the retreat. And then I had this thought, oh, but my thoughts are just thoughts. That's all they are. But it wasn't just an ordinary thought. It's like a kaplunk moment where I thought, wow, what if my thoughts are just thoughts and I don't have to take them so seriously? And then something just shifted in me after that realization. It wasn't just a thought, it was a deep recognition. And I started crying and I don't know, it was quite a cathartic experience. I remember my heart opening again, a bit like that experience when I was 20s. I started crying and weeping.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know why, just my heart just opened up. My mind went quiet, and I had this very deep recognition that I don't have to worry about anything because my thoughts are just thoughts anyway. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
have to take them seriously. And eventually, from that experience, that's when I would say I had an awakening experience where I felt this complete shift in my identity from being identified with thoughts to feeling like I was the space between the thoughts and around the thoughts. Um, and for about 2 months, I had this experience of just being completely neurosis free. Every
Mm-hmm.
time a thought came in, I'd just see it and go, oh, that's just a thought, big deal. It would go, and then I'd come back to feeling, I kind of felt really sensitive and really alive, and sensitive in a good way. Like I felt everything. Sounds were more vivid, sensations were more vivid, connection was more heartfelt with people, and it wasn't just my head, my heart opened, and I went back to my Gestalt group and I tried to explain it to them that my neurosis had gone. And they just looked at me like I was mad, going, Noel, your neurosis is not gone. Like
Mm-hmm.
I could see their suspicion. And um, I don't think they really understood what self-realization was. Like Gestalt
Mm-hmm.
is more around integrating your personal baggage and processing it. It's not necessarily interested in what awakening is. Well, at least most Gestalt therapists are not interested in that.
Right.
And so they looked at me like I was just had gone mad and I was in denial and regressed back to my narcissistic delusions. So, and that was okay. I mean, I was hoping that they might mirror that to me, but they didn't. Um, um, anyway, I continued to do work on myself in the Gestalt context, like more personal work, working through my anger towards my dad and my mum. But I was really interested in Vipassana now. I kind of had to do 2 hours of meditation a day. And I did it for a while. And by the time I did the third retreat, I had this inkling that it was making me escape myself. I was starting to feel like I was spiritually bypassing. I kind of intuitively knew I was having these beautiful experiences of openness and spaciousness in the mind, but I intuitively knew if I follow this path, it's going to take me further away from the personal work I need to do, which is learn how to be intimate and vulnerable with people and to show up as a human being. And I just had this intuition that I need to park the spiritual stuff and work on the personal stuff. I can't remember why I had that intuition or what informed it. Maybe it was something I was reading, but because I was doing a lot of reading at that time. Um, but anyway, I made that choice just to put that away for a while. I could feel it. It felt like it was a bit premature for me in a way. Like I needed to do the personal stuff first. And so then I just continued to do Gestalt for another year, and um, I continued to do personal therapy for quite a while,
Mm-hmm.
probably another 5 or 6 years of personal therapy.
Wow.
And I didn't do the meditation for quite a while until I was 30. Then I went back into that through the diamond work.
Mm-hmm.
Got back into interest in spirituality and meditation.
I find it amazing that you had this insight yourself, because I have been speaking to so many people who have been doing all kinds of practices, spiritual practices. And I'm always fascinated by that because I myself, I've never meditated in my life. I've never had any spiritual practice. And so I love to listen about people's experiences, and what I have found is sort of two sides of it, just based on those stories that so many people, who practice something, whether it's Vipassana or anything else, is that it can totally be a gateway to a really profound experience, that particular practice. But there's a point at which that same practice becomes a sort of a sedative, basically, or just a way to escape the discomfort that arises. But I can tell, that more and more, this is why I'm doing this channel, basically, because more and more people find themselves in that place where you found yourself and where I found myself, where they've had some kind of profound liberating insight or shift, and then shit hits the fan after a while, and they're like, what the hell is going on? And
Mm.
if their particular group that they're part of, maybe, or teachers are not only talking about it, but they're dismissing the whole thing
Yeah.
or downplaying, then where do you go with
Which then
that?
makes people start to become ashamed of that and think that they're on the wrong track and that something's wrong and they just need to meditate harder and go back into the transcendent realms and
Yeah, yeah,
do longer meditation retreats. Like, yeah, a lot of organizations will just reinforce the spiritual bypassing, and
yeah.
people end up feeling ashamed of the mess that's there that starts to open up after the first awakening often.
Yeah, and so this
Mm.
can be extremely confusing and scary because you are having this insight into the nature of reality, yourself, or whatever, and at the same time, like your relationships, your actual day-to-day human life is a mess, and
Yeah.
you're constantly kind of pro protecting yourself from vulnerability and from any trigger, anything that will disrupt anything, and so it's a really, for me, that period was really suffocating, it was really suffocating way of living.
Mm.
Because the body longed for that freedom that my mind
Yeah.
found, and it was not getting it, because I kept
Hmm.
on just pushing it down. So this is incredible to hear you talk about how many years you spent doing this personal work, and the fact that you even had that insight yourself, because sometimes it takes a teacher or someone else to kind
I,
of
I,
say,
yeah, to be honest, I don't know whether it was my insight or whether because I was reading some pretty awesome people back then. I was getting into Ken Wilber and
mm-hmm,
some Buddhist psychotherapist, a guy called John Welwood, who wrote a beautiful book called The Psychology of Awakening, um, and a couple of other great books. And he was
mm-hmm,
inspiring me. He wrote another book called Where East Meets West, and there was a lot of chapters about what I was going through. And I think his work kind of reminded me that you need to have an ego before you dissolve it. He talked about that concept of you need to kind of have ego strength before you start dissolving it. and that you need to integrate your shadow side before you start moving into the awakening transcendent dimensions. Or if you are going to be interested in transcendent work, awakening work, um, it can be a support then to turn back towards the messy, shadowy parts of our psyche. And Adyashanti is someone I've also followed for many years. And he wrote that beautiful book called The End of Your World.
Oh my
And
God, this is literally number one book on my list of books I recommend to
oh,
people.
really? Oh,
Yes,
wow.
yeah, yeah.
What an amazing book, huh? All his books I loved, and that they also just kept on bringing me back to you've got to do the work of growing up. This is what Ken Wilber calls it. You've got to do the work of growing up before you really devote yourself to waking up. I mean, they're both interconnected parts of development, but if all you do is just waking up, you become imbalanced and unintegrated. And that's why there's so many dangerous cult leaders in the world that are abusing their disciples and kind of misbehaving, if you will, because I think they've done a lot of waking up work and they've cultivated that line of development, but they haven't necessarily cultivated the growing up work of integrating your trauma and your shame and learning how to relate from a vulnerable place. And I think, and also studying psychology kind of kept me down to earth a bit because I was studying to be a psychotherapist. And I knew you got to work for your shit.
Yeah.
Um, so that kind of grounded me as well. It made me have a psychologically informed spirituality rather than just a transcendent spirituality that is up and out.
Yeah.
I wanted to go down and in. I was interested in going back into the body because I knew I was already a great intellectualizer. I kind of knew my work was to get back in the body, back into my emotions and reconnect to my heart. And when I did that, that's when I felt like my relationships got a whole lot better and my friendships got a whole lot better. And I enjoyed that. I didn't want to be, I'd met some people who'd done a lot of Vipassana and they were impersonal. They were detached. They were like so equanimous that they didn't care about anything.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt that impersonal quality in some of these meditation people I felt, and I didn't want to be like that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people, including myself, go through this stage. So I also want to like make it very clear that this is part of the process too, getting sort of stuck in the transcendent for a bit, or maybe even for a long time.
Yeah,
So
it's part of the process.
um,
It can happen, can't it?
yeah, it's not like we're doing it on purpose. We just don't know any better. So it's kind of, and
Mm.
especially if you don't have people around and can say that, hey, like you're a jerk and it's time, you're acting like a jerk and it's time to maybe have a good look at it, then, you just wouldn't know. And of course, it completely makes sense that like blissing out on a retreat or doing psychedelics or doing some kind of awesome practice that you know, takes you to those higher states and stuff like that is way better than sitting with your shame or like the pain of rejection, right?
Totally.
Or, I mean, come on.
Come
So,
on. It feels
give me
so
some,
good to
yeah, I mean,
bliss
give me some
out.
psychedelics anytime.
Yeah.
Um, so I completely understand that, but it's nevertheless, um, from where I'm looking now, when I hear people sometimes talk about non-duality and they say, but that's duality. And I'm like, what kind of non-duality is it if it's pushing anything that arises in the experience away? Like, isn't that the whole point that it includes everything, including the
Yeah.
physical body? That's why it's called
Yeah.
non-duality.
Yeah.
And
It
so I
includes
think
everything.
exactly. So I think that people, when we sort of are stuck in that let's call it transcendent bit, there is still the perception of separation going on, that the body somehow is not included and the traumas are not included and
Yeah, there's a split.
there's a split, right? And this is why
Yeah.
people feel so conflicted, literally on the inside, in their bodies. They can actually
Mm.
experience that split. And I certainly felt it for a very long time. So, I can completely understand that. So you said that you did therapy and you did a lot of Gestalt therapy. Are there any kind of other modalities that you also started to explore? And which one would you say you found to be sort of more useful, or is it that a combination of a few that you benefited from and that you kind of recommend to people?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think every part of the journey is important, isn't it? Every chapter in our lives has something to offer us, and same with every kind of therapy. There's always something to be learned from different therapy modalities. But I liked Gestalt because it was very holistic, and I kind of felt like I needed something that was holistic. But I went and studied somatic experiencing about 10 years after I was a Gestalt therapist. So that was when I was perhaps in my early 40s.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was partly more interested in it as a psychologist and therapist. I was starting to get a sense that the whole movement towards embodiment and that the body keeps the score of, Bessel van der Kolk's book, Body Keeps the Score, and
Yeah.
um, Babette Rothschild's work, The Body Remembers. I was really drawn to the embodied. What's that say?
The Tao
The
of Trauma.
Oh, Kathy Kane. Is that Kathy
Yeah.
Kane's book?
I just started on it.
Yeah,
Incredible.
yeah. Kathy Kane's great. I've done training with her, and she's a great teacher and incredibly knowledgeable. And she's a somatic experiencing therapist too, as you
Mm-hmm.
know. But I was really drawn to the embodiment therapies because I felt like if you've got to work through trauma, you got to do it through the body, and you can't process trauma at an intellectual level. And I experienced that directly as a therapist that all of my clients that were coming, I was a sexual assault counselor, a male sexual assault counselor for 4 years. So I worked with men who had histories of sexual abuse, and all of them had pretty intense trauma, and most of it was showing up in their body as contractions and brace patterns and psychosomatic symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really clear that the trauma lived more in their bodies than their minds. Like it would be affecting their minds, but it's living in their nervous systems. And I became a bit disillusioned with the cognitive therapies that were all like cognitive behavioral therapy that was saying, just challenge your thoughts, look for opposite
Reframe.
evidence, reframe yourself, reframe your thoughts, and then you're going to be fine and dandy. And my experience was that that wasn't really making a big change for people unless they were able to be present in their bodies and work for their feelings at a bottom-up level. So I just wanted to study more about the embodied therapy. So I did somatic experiencing, and that was a wonderful course. And I learned so much about the nervous system and about trauma and polyvagal theory. And then since I graduated from that, I became an assistant and continued assisting the next cohort of students. And I've been assisting for about 10 years now. So
Amazing.
that became a real passion. I loved somatic experiencing and the way they work. And that kind of just complemented my Gestalt training really beautifully, which is very experiential and embodied and relational. And so together, I felt like they were um, pretty good bodies of knowledge.
I use astrology purely for shadow work. So
Uh-huh.
I see people to just help them uncover certain unconscious patterns, which usually they're kind
Uh-huh.
of aware of, but it's kind of nice to get a confirmation or even put a name on it. So it's like it becomes a bit more conscious. But then again, that knowledge alone is not enough. Then you have to go into what is keeping that pattern alive, what is keeping that
Yeah, what's
pattern,
driving it?
what's
Yeah.
driving in, what is keeps it coming up, coming up, coming up. And so this is why I started kind of guiding people intuitively with the people that I kind of work more regularly. So they trust me, I trust them, so we can do it. But I realized more and more that the somatic processing is absolutely needed. And so this is why I started embodied processing course, because even though I feel like I intuitively kind of can also do that, I still think it takes a skill. And the more skills you can have and the more tools to do it, the better, because
Yeah,
everyone is also
totally.
different. So I got
Yeah.
to appreciate it so much. So you did the somatic work, and then you mentioned that you eventually, at some point, came across the diamond heart approach. So at which
Yeah.
point did that happen? And
I started the Diamond Heart approach before I did somatic experiencing training. I think it was 2003 I started the Diamond approach, and I think I
wow.
started SE training in 2011, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Yeah. So the Diamond approach came first, and that was another amazing body of knowledge by Hamid Ali. His pen name's A.H. Almas. I don't know whether you've
Mm-hmm.
ever
I am
come
familiar with
across.
him. Yeah.
Yeah. I loved it because I loved the integration of the personal work with the spiritual work, and they kind of
Mm-hmm.
integrate depth psychology and object relations theory and kind of Western psychotherapy with the kind of essence of Sufism and Buddhism and kind of beautiful spirituality, like kind of more Eastern spirituality. And I love that integration. So every time I went to a diamond approach, I felt like I was doing really deep work on my childhood stuff and working through the psychodynamics of my relationships with my mum and my dad and my early core beliefs and unprocessed hatred and fear and terror and rage. And but I was working through that, but at the same time, they teach you how to meditate and cultivate states of presence. And their theory is that awakening happens more in a gradual way. It's not a sudden awakening school. It's more of what they would call a progressive path where you see through some self-image like that's coming from your ideal self or your superego. You work with it, you see through it, you recognize where it comes from, you inquire into it, process the emotions that might be connected to it, and then just naturally there's a disidentification from that self-image.
Mm-hmm.
And as that self-image dissolves, more qualities of presence open up, more expansion opens up, more connection to what they call true nature, and essential qualities start to manifest. And it's a kind of a process that just gradually builds over time until probably after about 7 years of doing the diamond work, they started to really do some deep teachings on the absolute, the dimensions, well,
Mm-hmm.
like uh, what do they call some of the absolute dimensions would be just really moving into those non-conceptual realms of awakening
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
non-duality and more those transcendent dimensions of
Mm-hmm.
just pure consciousness. That they started to do more and more teachings about that. But every time we learn about some state of more kind of the absolute dimensions, they always work with what gets in the way of that. What are the psychological issues that come up and get in the way of you recognizing your true nature as consciousness, for instance? So they
Yes.
always work with the psychological barriers to awakening and transcendence. And I really loved that integration work of there's no room to spiritually bypass in the diamond work. You're always working with the shadow, but
Yeah.
they're also really interested in the awakening process and the self-realization process. So it's a really great integration and synthesis of growing up work and waking up work, which is why I really love it.
So I'm really curious about the personal growth work bit, because the other thing that I've noticed just from listening to people online and people sharing stories with me, how, there can be a sort of fixation on the transcendent bit for some, but there can equally be fixation on the personal growth, psychology, or
Yeah.
healing stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing is that, and it's kind of funny because I love seeing patterns, I can't help but just see patterns. So I've noticed that very often the people who've either had profound awakening and then found themselves suffering again, they get disillusioned with awakening, they get disillusioned with non-duality, especially because a lot of non-duality, I have to say, is literally not a non-duality to me. It's like because it's constantly pushing experiences away and
Yeah. Yeah. It's
demonizing
perpetuating that
human
split.
experience. So it's
Yeah.
literally perpetuating the sense of separation, ironically.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
you know, so then I can see that there's almost like this pattern of people kind of getting disappointed with that and being like, I'm done with this shit. My humanness is like chasing me and like it's not leaving me. I'm right. It's like, what's going on? So then they move toward people who start talking about embodiment or
Right.
integration and so on. But then it becomes like a fixation in and of itself,
Mm.
where there may be almost like a compulsion to now clear everything and heal everything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And only then, when I finally healed
Yeah.
everything and cleared everything, will I have the final kind of freedom or real. I think you get the gist
Realization.
of what I'm saying. So I would love
Totally.
to hear from you about this because you've dealt with so many approaches and so many different people. I'd love to hear what are your thoughts on that.
Yeah. It's such an interesting topic, isn't it? This whole area. And yeah, and I think that can be another trap. Like you can get trapped in the transcendent realms,
Mm-hmm.
and you can get trapped in the idea that I've got to resolve every single trauma and process everything in my unconscious before I'm allowed to wake up and experience um, myself as pure consciousness, or have an awakening experience. And I think that kind of the polarized places that people can get trapped or stuck.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, because I think the nice thing about awakening is you kind of, like, to me, a genuine awakening is recognizing that you're always going to have an unconscious. There's always going to be a little bit of messiness. We're all a little bit fucked up and messy, and
Yeah.
and there's an acceptance of that. Like, when I'm experiencing some of those places, like when I meditate and I drop into that place beyond, between my thoughts, and I just feel that pure awareness. It feels like that pure awareness welcomes everything. Like everything's welcome in that place, like including a neurotic thought or a painful feeling. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the content of the awareness is. It's all allowed. And I think that's more of a kind of an integrated awakening, when everything's welcomed, everything's allowed, and there's no ideal state that you have to reach.
Yeah.
Like, one of the things I love about the diamond work is the idea that the most important thing is to be exactly where you are, whatever your experience is. And that becomes a doorway into who you are. If you can be where you are, whatever's showing up in your experience, and you stay present to it and you inquire into it and you welcome it, it becomes a portal into a deeper dimension of yourself. And
And I think
yeah,
that this is like the biggest disservice that's been done to awakening, so to speak. And I'm not saying that it's been done on purpose at all, or like it is malicious intent on any side, but just this promoting of this like awakening as this like 24/7 blissful state, where you have no problems, no issues coming up, life for some reason is just becoming this
yeah,
smooth ride and you just float on this like transcendental
yeah,
cushion above
that's the
it. And
kind of the illusion and the promise,
right.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that I think has been one of the disservices done to people who are seeking. And the other one is this idea that like you become someone, a certain particular someone that is awake, and that it looks a certain way. And so,
Yeah.
we end up kind of really just swapping one conditioning for
Right.
another and developing
Yeah.
just another identity. Yeah.
And in a way, it's like it's the separate self efforting and striving to reach to some ideal standard.
Mm-hmm.
But in both those polarized positions, it's the separate self thinking, I've got to do it. I've got to make
Mm.
myself whole. I've got to work through every single trauma.
Yeah.
I've got to wake up and I've got to make that happen. And I think when we're identified with the separate self trying to make something happen, we're destined to kind of stay stuck to a
Yeah.
degree. And I think that one of the things I love about Zen, my interest in Zen, is it's all about, they call it just, you just enter into don't know mind and you enter into the moment and just work with what's there now. Like you don't have to try to make something happen.
Yeah.
It's kind of more of a process of emptying out, a process of subtraction and letting go of all concepts, all ideas, all notions of spirituality. And that becomes that don't know mind becomes a doorway into the present moment more and more fully, more intimacy with the present moment. And one of the things that I've learned to do from the diamond work and the Zen work is I don't go searching for my traumas to resolve. I just work with what comes up in the moment. If I'm
Totally.
triggered, there's an opportunity to inquire. If that's showing up in this moment, I'm feeling some emotional pain, some shame, some fear, some anger. That's 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 the moment to stop, be curious, inquire, work with what's coming up, welcome it, surrender to it. And I've kind of realized I don't need to make that happen. Like life is going to trigger me. I don't need to go searching for my traumas and going on this kind of archaeological dig. All I need to do is just be present
Mm-hmm.
in this moment. And if this moment is feeling peaceful, I'll be with that. If this moment is full of pain and insecurity, I'll be with that.
Yeah.
And all I need to do is just be with the truth of the moment. And it's always going to unfold. And I don't need, I'm starting to learn, and it's a process that most of what's going on, I don't really need to effort to make anything happen. I just need to be with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, you did say a few things in the conversation with Matt that I watched, um, when you realized that the awakening or spirituality is not really about seeking, it's about surrendering,
Surrendering. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And exactly to the moment, to the moment exactly as it is. And I think it's probably why we're such fans of The End of Your World by Adyashanti, because first of all, he talks about that stuff, the wounds, the trauma. I loved when he talked about his own trauma and coping
Yeah. So
mechanism.
honest, huh?
Yeah, when he talked about how they were playing out in this like particular romantic relationship, and I was just like so grateful, because we can have this idea of an enlightened person or awakened person or whatever as kind of, just this whole idealized, everybody will have their own ideal around it. They never get angry.
Mm.
They're not reactive. They don't whatever, they don't cheat. They don't, and I'm like,
They're perfect.
seriously, they're just give me the halo and I just stuck it on their heads, and it's like, that's all that's missing, right? And so I actually, there's part of me, because of the underworld that I've been to and seen my own shadow and see the depths of the unconscious, when I hear about spiritual teachers kind of up to no good, let's just put it this way, it just doesn't surprise me at all. It just
No.
doesn't surprise me, precisely for that reason, because when you see that how that unconscious works, and if that's never been met, and addressed, then what do you expect? So I mean, there's not one spiritual teacher, including teachers that I absolutely love to listen to and respect, that it would surprise me if something came up. It just
Mm.
doesn't, because they're still human. And this is why I'm so grateful for Adyashanti's book, The End of Your World, because he's one of the very few teachers that actually opened up about this stuff and
Yeah.
basically talked about his humanness,
He's very real, very
right?
honest. You probably heard him talk about his recent trauma for the chronic pain that he's had, and
Yeah,
he had
yeah,
literally had post-traumatic stress symptoms for quite a while.
yeah.
Like that was very kind of humbling and kind of wonderful just to hear someone I respect so much just really share his human mess and kind
Yep.
of normalize that. Like we're always, I think we're always, personally for me, I think we're always going to be a little bit messy sometimes. And
A little bit.
well, sometimes a little bit, sometimes a lot. And sometimes I have moments of not feeling messy. And
Yeah, yeah.
I think one of the insights I had during the diamond work at a retreat was it doesn't matter what I experience as long as I'm present to it.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. It's not about trying to reach some ideal state. It's like just be honest, be real, be truthful, and be with what's here now. And that's the path. It's in a way, it's very simple. Like,
It's literally the path. And it's so simple that for most of us it's hard to believe. It can't be this simple. But actually when you start meeting the reality of what is, moment by moment, you realize that it may be simple, but it's not easy, because that's when you realize all the coping mechanisms and all the protective mechanisms, that have been playing out, and distractions and resistance. Then we started to kind of realize well, at least that was the realization for me. I had no idea the layers of resistance, and how
yeah,
even I fooled myself when I thought that I wasn't resisting any discomfort anymore. There was still resistance, but I wouldn't know that it was still there until it was gone.
I think it's a human nature condition, a human condition thing that we want to live up to some ideal standard of ourselves, to
Yeah.
kind of have some kind of self-image, ideal self-image. And I think partly spirituality is slowly dissolving that and letting go of any hope for some perfect image and just being humble enough to be with whatever's arising now, including all the mess.
Yeah.
Um, but that takes a great deal of courage, doesn't it? And humility to be with the mess and to let go of the ideal image that we want to hold on to. Like my ideal image is, knowledgeable, intelligent, nice, funny, popular,
Of
articulate,
course.
um, makes good jokes, makes people laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And I often catch myself falling into that fantasy again. It's like, it's just, it's that I thought, the thought that this is me, this ideal self, and I want to strengthen it. It's
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah.
it's so powerful, isn't it? That
Mm.
impulse to kind of reify some ideal self-image and to try to hold on to it.
Yeah, and to me the beauty is in seeing that and not denying that bit,
Yeah, owning it, owning it.
right?
Yeah.
Right? And so that's it. That's it. It's just completely being with precisely what's going on, and it's actually incredible how just honesty about what's going on with us. You know, it can be, it's again, it sounds so simple, but one of the realizations that was really shocking to me that came out of the journey that I've been on was just how dishonest I was with myself, how I
Right.
was fooling myself to thinking certain things. And especially after the first awakening, there are times when I just wasn't able to admit how I really felt.
Mm,
Simply,
mm.
like whether I was pissed off or I was really suffering or something like that, I wouldn't, because, you know, at that point, I didn't do that because in my mind, I knew I was fundamentally okay. So that stuff didn't matter. But
Right.
then, right? So then, really, I was kind of seeing what's going on, but I was suppressing it by downplaying it that this was just a story. So see the
Yeah, I
trick.
get it. It's a very subtle way of tricking yourself out of feeling the shadow. Yeah.
Yeah. I think those are the conversations that are really needed generally, but specifically within the context of the awakening journey,
Yeah.
because I know that so many people feel very alone and very confused, like I said earlier, because they've had profound awakenings and now they're suffering.
Mm.
So my last question to you is, if you can, what would you recommend to someone who actually is realizing that it's time to be in the body? It's time to perhaps address some trauma or childhood wounds, but they've never done it. They are afraid. They don't even know how to go about it. They don't maybe even feel connected with their body in the first place because they've been disconnected for so many years,
Yeah.
if not all their lives. Where a person like that could start?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think people need information in order to support them on their journey. Like I know that was a big support for me. It kind of gave me some scaffolding and some kind of knowledge about how the path is going to unfold. So
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend some really good books to people to understand trauma, to understand how it affects us, understand how to navigate trauma. Like there's some of the books I've given my clients would be Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful book. It's easy to read. It just explains trauma really clearly and the way through trauma through the body. He's got some beautiful books. Um, it depends if they're kind of really new to the path. I would probably suggest Waking the Tiger. I've suggested that book to quite a lot of clients.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are many other good books out there on trauma. Like I like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of Babette Rothschild's books that she talks about trauma from an embodied approach. Um, so I think giving people suggestion to some really good books that are kind of not just theoretical, but people's personal stories are in it as well. So people can start to feel hope that people can heal their trauma and there is a pathway through the body. And many people have gone down that path and many people have healed. Not got rid of, or when I say healed, I don't mean got to the end of the rainbow and everything's beautiful and wonderful, but they've done enormous growth. They've, learned how to live a very fulfilling life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably where would start people or link them into some good websites and resources. And once they start learning about that, learning about their body and the nervous system, they usually naturally get inspired to want to do some therapy. And yeah, embodied processing is a great community as well. And as you know, you're doing that. There's a lot out there, isn't there? There's so
Yeah.
many different resources and supports, yeah, and
Yeah.
communities that are kind of trauma informed.
So reading those books can be incredibly illuminating because we may think that we've not have any wounds or trauma or anything, but when you start reading about the coping mechanisms, that stem out of trauma, then I don't think there's one human that will not recognize themselves in that, and that's how you find out, right?
Yeah.
So Noah, where do you, because you are so busy. I remember seeing your bio and I was like, oh my God, this guy is involved in so many things. Um, but do you still see people one on one? Can people still see you one on one?
Yeah, yeah. I've got a private psychology practice and that's the bread and butter of my work that I
Mm-hmm.
do one-on-one work. And I do a lot of supervision of other therapists and
Mm-hmm.
but I still have do quite a lot of one-on-one work, which I love. I love that work.
I will
Yeah.
leave all the details and all the links, and including the books that Noel suggested and anything else that comes to mind in the description to this video. But in the meantime, thank you for being such a wonderful guest, and thank you for this conversation. Thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful to talk about it all. Yeah.
Take care. Bye.